Thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone who's been able to hang in there with me. I promise that this is going to be really good. It's going to be practical and actionable. And I'm not sure if we've got more than educators on the call still, parents, youth serving professionals in the community in different capacities. But I have to believe that what I'll be sharing with you, which is research informed and research based, can definitely help us to reduce these problem behaviors and then ideally, of course, increase the prevalence of positive behaviors and kindness, as has been shared, over the last couple of hours. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. I'll minimize all of these toolbars again, get them out of the way so you don't see any gray bars on my screen unnecessarily. What I wanted to do to keep things interactive as we close out our evening together is to do a little bit of flash polling. And so if you don't mind, could you pick up your phone and open up your camera app and load up this QR code? Alternatively, you can open up another tab in a web browser on whatever device you're using and go to the web address at the bottom of the screen, which is pollev.com/post. Again, pollev.com/post. I want to give you just a few more seconds to load up this QR code in your camera phone, in your camera's phone, in your phone's camera, there it is. Or again, just open up a tab, open up another web browser and type in the web address at the bottom of the screen, pollev.com/post. When you do so, all of the polls that I want to present to you will automatically populate in that tab or in that screen on your phone browser or in your laptop browser, whatever you're using. So keep that tab open during our time together. So again, the polls I want to show you will automatically load. So this is the first poll that will have populated on your screen. And it's asking you, how many years have you worked in schools? And I understand that some of you have not worked in schools yet, or to this point, or you do other things. If you missed the QR code, all these polls are available at the web address on each of these poll screens, which is pollev.com/post, pollev.com/post. And forgive me for all that instruction. I won't need to do that again because y'all will have it. So what we see is that a solid 50% of you are between 11 plus years of being in the school system. So thank you for serving in that capacity. We're all pouring our lives out in order to just have a legacy of educating and inspiring youth. Some of you, about 17% or less than 5 years, and about 16% don't work in schools, 10% do other things. Next question. If you think about how skilled and proficient you are when it comes to social media, technology, devices, and you compare yourself to all the other adults you know, what would you say you are? Okay, so most of y'all are average, 2 out of 3 of you, in fact, and about 1 out of 4 would say above average. By the way, don't feel condemned if you're pretty clueless or below average. Each of us truly are getting better every single day as we continue to learn and experiment with different technologies. What is your biggest area of current concern? And I know we're focusing on cyberbullying today. These are all the areas that I study, and to be sure, there's actually a great deal of overlap. I also understand on your plate of responsibilities are other things that would be your biggest concern areas, but just in terms of the areas I work in. Okay, 2 out of 5 would say online well-being. 1 out of 3 would say racism, sexism, homophobia, misogyny, etc. Okay, we'll do more polls in just a little bit. Thank you for participating. Climate. There's so many definitions. In your undergraduate or graduate training, you were given more definitions. The way that I like to think about it is more general. I think about it as this constellation of elements. And those elements could include various components such as connectedness or belongingness or peer respect. That's a part of it, without a doubt. School spirit is actually a part of it. Being invested in, of course, the school community. School safety is a part of it. Morale, not just students, but also staff, educators. All of those come together and they make up climate. Climate is a big deal. And before I share with you our research, let me ask you, based on that simple generic definition I've just given you, how would you rate the quality of the climate you've created at your school if, again, you work in a school? And if you don't, maybe you could discuss, the school that your kid goes to and the climate that you think that they've worked to create. And I appreciate your honesty. We have great intentions, but sometimes we're just not resourced properly. So we're strapped, and that's not right. We want to do more for our children. Okay, let's move on. Most of you, without a doubt, would say average, and 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 8 of you would say poor. So thinking about climate, we decided to measure this, and we asked these sorts of questions. Hey, do you feel safe? Do you feel that teachers care about you? Are they in your corner? Do they try to help you succeed? Also, do the students trust and respect the teachers? Because if that's not happening, well, then all of the discipline and instruction is undermined at its root. Are they fair? Are they partial to some students and not others? Do they take bullying seriously? Cyberbullying, of course, as well. What we found, just to summarize this chart, is that in schools where students perceived a poorer or a worse school climate, well, then you had more problem behaviors, such as bullying, not displayed on this slide, but cyberbullying and sexting. Said in another way, in schools where students perceived a more positive or healthier school climate, you had less of these behavioral problems. And the literature is very clear. When you improve school climate, okay, this happens, but also you have higher academic achievement, you have lower truancy, you have lower absenteeism type issues, you have higher morale. So it's such a powerful construct, and we need to continue to focus in on it. So Justin and I, my colleague Justin Patchen at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, we wanted to move on from that incipient research to think about, okay, what else is there related to climate? So you might remember, again, from your undergraduate and graduate training, the work of Makobi and Martin and Diana Baumrind, who identified that there are 4 parenting styles that occur along 2 dimensions, 2 axes. One is disciplinary structure, which of course involves like rule setting and making sure you've got these expectations in place, doing what you can to get your children to rise up to those expectations, etc. Standards, discipline, penalties for wrongdoing, etc. But then the other axis would be support, warmth, unconditional love, care, compassion. I'm going to bring this back to schools in just a second. So on these 2 axes, we've got 4 types of parenting styles. One is neglectful, where you're really low on disciplinary structure and rule setting and etc. And you're also very low on warmth and unconditional love. Permissive parenting is where, okay, you're high on warmth and unconditional love and care, sort of like warm and fluffy type environment, but you're very low on structures and rules and expectations. Authoritarian parenting, which is where you're high on rules and expectations and structure, but done so in an environment that lacks the necessary love and care that's so essential. And then finally, the agreement was that authoritative parenting was the best type. So yes, you've got rules, and there's penalties for transgressions, rule breaking. There's consequences in place, and we believe you're going to rise up to the standards we set in our household. But all that is done and conveyed in an environment of love and trust and patience and grace and kindness. So that's the best type of parenting. Well, we wanted to see, hey, is that the best type of school climate? So as you might figure, yes, it is. What we found by and large was that in schools that were authoritative, so high discipline, but also high support and warmth, there was much less bullying, offending, and cyberbullying offending. So key. So permissive and neglectful schools, they're most problematic. Also, school avoidance. I just thought this was an interesting fact that I wanted to share with you. You're going to have less avoidance issues, absentee type issues in schools that are authoritative, because the school knows that the students know that the school cares about them and is also believing that they can bring out the best of them through, again, the structure and the rules. Then finally, students feel most safe in authoritative schools. So all of this, again, ties together into what we can do, because clearly it's so critical that we focus in on building and maintaining a positive school climate. Thinking of ideas, let's get into this. First off, with COVID, with quarantine and lockdown, it's been extremely tricky. I want to extend all sorts of grace to you, like I would ask for myself from you, being an educator, and just realizing how miserably difficult it has been to port all of our lessons to online, then move things back, then do hybrid. It's been a hot mess. With that said, though, there have been some educators in schools who have really innovated, and I think that these innovations should continue well past the pandemic. For example, since so many kids are already online, let's continue to tap into that to build community, to build investment in what we're trying to do at our school. This is an example of a district in New Jersey, which has created the Spirit Week, but involving hashtags and different platforms where you get to just be a part. And of course, you get likes and comments and maybe shares depending on the platform. But the goal here, since again, kids are already online and they're likely following these accounts and following this hashtag, that they participate, that they know that their presence, even if it's online, is valued. Their contributions are meaningful. We want to hear what they have to say and what they have to share. We also have various Spirit Weeks, which might involve these platforms, whether it's your favorite show on Netflix or something on Instagram, maybe using a particular filter on Snap, TikTok video, that's of course appropriate, etc. But again, all of that continues to build traction and investment in the school community, even if kids are, let's say, at home during the weekends, or it's winter break, or it's summer break, and they're going to be coming back in the fall. So consider that. Yes, I know it's another thing to have on your list, and maybe you need a point person to make sure all of the content is appropriate, but this could be so very valuable to, again, keep that connection, that belonging occurring. Here's an example of a Bedford Bearcats official Instagram page, and you can see they send out reminders. So many students follow this page. You can see in the bottom right, a little person or a person holding up a little sign that says, "Block the bully." Again, just another opportunity to send out specific messages that can be used to plant seeds in the minds of our youth to make the appropriate decisions, the wise decisions, the best decisions, the mature decisions. And this is a principal who every single day during the pandemic created a new video, and he posted it on Instagram, tied to the official high school page, welcoming everyone to the day, giving shout outs to those specific students who had birthdays, because he knew that from the registrar's office, maybe giving them specific reminders about behavioral expectations, kindness, positivity, whatever the messages are, but continuing to keep them tied into the community that he's worked so hard to build with, of course, his team. Switching gears slightly, I think a lot about the whole, okay, we've got a lot of bystanders. Typically, our youth are not the targets, not the aggressors, but they tend to see it happen. So most of the students are then witnesses or bystanders, but we don't want them to be bystanders. We want them to be upstanders. How can we foster and facilitate this? The first thing that comes to my mind is this great series put out by Starbucks on YouTube for free. They have a couple of seasons worth where they highlight stories of youth and young people doing upstanding things in the community, maybe being a voice for the voiceless, maybe recognizing some sort of social justice issue that's been neglected, maybe supporting marginalized youth, whatever it is, they're being upstanders in the community. And from what I can tell, as I work with so many youth in schools, many students are surveying the landscape, looking to be inspired. And I alluded to that in my first presentation today. So let's inspire them with stories of youth just like them who are doing epic and legendary things to make a difference. I'm a fan of anti-bullying clubs. I wouldn't call it an anti-bullying club. And I know Celia talked a little bit about clubs and some of the work related to youth-centric movements, which are so very powerful, and I deeply appreciate that. So It Takes One is one club that I work with in Pennsylvania, and I know Celia has a club that's very similar in terms of the wording, but the point is that yes, it just takes one person to sort of swim upstream when everybody else is floating downstream. That's kind of the message we want to convey, isn't it? You have to be a leader. If you see something unjust, even if everyone else just keeps looking at their shoes and sits on their hands, you do something about it because it's unjust, because it's wrong, because someone's been victimized. Now, when it comes to these clubs, just a pro tip, this will make sense. We want to try to have student leaders who have some cachet and platform at the school. Otherwise, unfortunately, these clubs don't get as much traction and visibility as they could. Now, of course, those student leaders, we want them to be genuinely engaged and desiring to really lift up this specific club and to really make a difference when it comes to the climate. We don't want the student leaders who just want to add it as a line to their resume when they apply for college. This phrase, see something, say something. I remember first hearing it back in 2001 after we had 9/11. But this specific phrase, it should absolutely be top of mind for all of our students. And again, you think about like Kitty Genovese, I apologize, Kitty Genovese, and that specific psychological phenomenon where we expect everyone else to sort of rise up and tell an authority, but then nobody does, and the victimization takes place or increases in severity. We got to get our kids to just speak up, even if someone else has spoken up, just to make sure it's been covered, that the adults are on it. So whether you not only say this orally, but you have messaging strategies across the entire school, visible posters, signage, whatever it takes, this is key. We need them to be the eyes and ears that we can't be. See something, say something. Celia also brought this up when it came to her allies and mentors group. I like to consider it in the line of purposed pairing, because you're being intentional about pairing a couple of students together. In this case, it would be, a fifth grader with a second grader or first grader, whatever, however you want to do it. 12th grader with a ninth grader, eighth grader with a sixth grader. But in that situation, you've got the older student showing the younger student the ropes. Okay, these are the behavioral expectations. We're so stoked that you're part of our community now, but we expect you to rise up and be mature in terms of your decision making, in terms of your emotional regulation, whatever. But at least it's not an adult preaching and lecturing to the kid. It's an older kid that the younger kid kind of wants to be like. So the older kid is growing in leadership skills, and the younger kid is learning the ropes, as I mentioned, but also has a point of contact who's not an adult, whom they might be very hesitant to talk to about major issues, but is another relatable kid that they can talk to and be like, I'm dealing with this, or I need some advice about this, whatever it is. And of course, the older adult can get help from, the older kid can get help from an adult as necessary, but it just helps again with feeling like you're part of a community where we have each other's backs. Purpose pairing. Student advisory boards, I think, are also a really great idea. And you have advisory meetings where faculty get together and maybe discuss over coffee and donuts various things you want to do, additions to the discipline manual, whatever it is. But I think it's so important to create a formal student advisory board because they have so much to say, they have so much to tell you. But if you never really demonstrate to them very clearly that, look, we care what you have to say, we want to validate your voice and elevate it as well, then they're just going to keep their mouth shut and they're going to be like, all right, well, the adults seem that they've got this covered. And yeah, they might not be doing the best job, but they're not looking to us for input. So we're going to keep our mouth shut and just focus on our lives, building our own kingdom, or however you might characterize it. So when you create a formal advisory board, they're like, hot dog, this is awesome. They want to hear what we have to say. And guess what? They speak up so much more and they clue you in to things that you need to know about. Do you have something like this in place? Again, these polls are at pollev.com/post. So, I mean, it's super encouraging to me to see that 2 out of 4 of you say yes, maybe a little less. But just as an idea that has worked well. I personally grew up in theater and drama, and some of your students did as well. There's a number of reasons for that. My specific reason is that I was very introverted and I just had trouble like looking at people in their eyes and having conversations with adults, frankly, other kids. And so my parents were like, man, we got to get Samir to break him out of, how can I say this? Samir needs to break out of his shell. That's how I would say it. And so they were like, let's thrust him into community theater. Now, I didn't actually mind on the other side of that because I love musicals now. And I was a part of like all these Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. And I even won an award for Best Supporting Actor for Ali Hakim, which is a critical role in Oklahoma, which has one of the best soundtracks ever. He's the Persian rug trader who falls for Annie. We won't get into that. But the point is, many kids have grown up in drama. And let's say you task them with the assignment of coming up with some sort of skit or role-playing scenario involving one of these issues that you and I care about, whether it's cyberbullying or problematic romantic relationships manifesting online, whatever it is, catfishing, something like that. Well, they will come up with something that's so relevant and compelling and gripping and that deeply resonates with the students, whereas if adults tried to do that, it would fail miserably. So we have to tap into the student body that we have at our fingertips, so to speak, and enlist their assistance in order to accomplish our school climate goals. It's the same way with dance. I was in dance when I was growing up, ballet, tap, hip hop, and jazz. And so since so many of our students have grown up in dance as well, let's enlist them. For example, we might ask them to come up with some sort of flash mob. And you might go onto YouTube and type in anti-bullying or anti-cyberbullying flash mob. You'll find so many examples of really, really cool choreographed numbers. And so you get some students to do that. All of a sudden, let's say in the cafeteria, music starts blaring through the speakers, a critical mass of students rises to their feet, and they just start dancing in synchronized fashion. And everyone is like, what in the world is happening? But right then and there, they have a platform to speak of what is near and dear to their hearts, whether it's victimization or how we're treating minority populations or misogynist comments heard in the locker room, whatever it is. But the point is that we're using them again to help us with our messaging, and they're glad to. And then of course they care more deeply about it because they have ownership in this topic. Caring connections. To me, this simply means if I were to go into your school and I pulled aside a student, I would be like, hey, if you were ever struggling with something heavy, let's say you bombed an exam. Let's say that your parents were always fighting at home and maybe about to get divorced. Let's say you're having money problems. Name one adult here on campus that you'd be able to go to. And I hope within a few seconds, a name pops in their head. And if it doesn't, again, don't feel indicted, but I think we've identified a deficiency which merits correction. We should do something about that. Because yes, we know that the child or the teenager might have a trusted adult in the community in terms of a coach, might be able to talk to their parents or a friendly uncle or aunt. But wouldn't it be best if they had someone at school? Definitely, definitely. I hope so. I think so. So if you're just honest with me, thinking about your population, would you say that students are extremely willing to talk to adults? Or maybe they put up walls, maybe they stiff arm you. It's just challenging. And to be sure, many times this is just not your fault at all. But it does tie, intricately into the climate that we've built. You can imagine the more positive, the healthier climate. Yeah, they're more willing. So these stats are pretty glaring, at least in our flash polling today. And we can perhaps discuss some of this during the Q&A that we'll have. As you've seen, there's been more and more kindness movements. Now, kindness movements are tricky because if they border on lame, then they actually are counterproductive and could even do more damage because everyone just makes fun of it and the harassment might continue. But you and I will agree that it isn't enough for a student to not do the wrong thing. We definitely need them to actually intentionally look for opportunities to do the right thing. Me as an adult, I always want to just be aware of my surroundings, even at the grocery store, wherever, where I can bring a smile to a face, where I can compliment someone about how they look or how they treated me, whatever it is. I'm always looking to bless other people, and I bet so many of you are as well. We want our students to do so as well, and we want it to become natural and habitual. We've seen social media being embraced when it comes to anonymous compliments pages. This is at my university. The HC is the honors college, and you can see almost 10 years ago, I was featured on it. Mostly they feature students, and by the way, this page gets handed down to the next generation by the graduating seniors who were in charge of it. But I've seen this on Instagram and I've seen it on Twitter, and anonymous compliments. Yeah, it seems pretty simple, but everyone loves to be recognized, celebrated, noticed. So many of our students are so desperate to be noticed. Frankly, so many of our adults are too. Why do we post? Because we need, on some psychological level, even neurological level, the like, the comment, that someone's interested in our lives, cares about us enough to stop and read and pay attention. So again, these sorts of feeds, they have promise. Some of you follow the Humans of New York page on Instagram, and the creator goes around and tells the story of random people in New York, and it's not necessarily a gigantic success story. Primarily, it's stories of resilience, of overcoming, where your heart goes out to this person. That's why this account is so popular. Your heart goes out to the person's being featured, and you're like, man, if I ever met you, I would genuinely care about you, and I would do anything I can to help you succeed. The cool thing is that many schools have come up with the Humans of blank blank as well, following that lead. So this is Humans of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. If that name rings a bell, it's this high school down here in South Florida, about an hour south of me, in the Coral Springs, Fort Lauderdale, Parkland type area. And they had that massive tragedy, that school shooting, about 3 or 4 Valentine's days ago. So big deal, right? So the cool thing is they created this feed and they're featuring students. And let's say I was a student and I didn't know this kid, but I read the story. Well, my heart's going to go out to them. And if I see them in the hallways, maybe I'll give them a little bit of a head nod. Maybe I'll say, hey, maybe I'll chat with them for a minute, because their story is very similar to my story. They don't have it all together, even though I thought maybe they did, just like I definitely don't have it all together. We know Brene Brown talks about how vulnerability is what brings us together. Well, school climate can take that specific strategy and build on it. I also think about positive stories. So you and I probably, as educators, we share a lot of cautionary tales, maybe even the horrific case studies that we hear about, that we see about, where youth have sabotaged their future, where they've dealt with massive regret based on what they've done online, something like that. I think those have value, but I think we should err and lean much more in the direction of sharing positive stories, because again, our youth just want to be inspired. And so this is Caitlin Hackey. She came up with Positive Post-it Day. And she wrote on thousands of Post-it notes, these complimentary, these encouraging notes, and put them on lockers all across her school. This is Campbell Remis. And at the age of 13, he learned how to sew. And so I kid you not, from scratch, he created these stuffed animals and takes them into children's hospitals and blesses those kids with diseases, even terminal diseases, to just spread love. This is Austin Pirine from Birmingham, Alabama, who eventually learned that there were some people who lived on the street who were homeless, and that really tugged at his heartstrings. And so he wanted to take all his birthday money and holiday money and use it to buy chicken sandwiches, and then go out with his dad to give these chicken sandwiches and encouraging words and love to these homeless individuals all across Birmingham. This is a video that I share with elementary schoolers, because a 4-year-old, you got to be inspired by that. This I would share with middle schoolers when I speak to them. It's Sonika Meenam, and I love this story personally because she gives attention to a population which I think is drastically neglected, and that is elderly residents of assisted living facilities and nursing homes. Many times they're forgotten even by family members who are just too busy. So she organizes these birthday parties for them because she knows that they've got stories to tell, so much words of wisdom to share. And so she recognizes them, she loves on them in very profound and meaningful ways. And she brings other people together in order to celebrate them. This is Austin Gutwein, and he came up with Hoops for Hope because his heart was touched by the knowledge of children in Africa who had lost their parents to AIDS. So he loves basketball, and he developed this free throw shooting contest where this is now international, Hoops for Hope, where you raise money based on how many free throws you're able to land across a period of time. And of course, that money would go to the cause he cares so deeply about. This is Max Bobholtz. His organization is called Angels at Bat, and he loves baseball. And he noticed that a few years ago, when Uganda made the Little League World Series, frankly, they had crappy equipment. And he was like, this is unacceptable because even our worst equipment is so much better than their best equipment. So he organized a drive where Little Leagues across the nation would submit and send in all of their gently used equipment. And then he shipped it over to Uganda, went to Uganda multiple times to bless these kids, to teach them baseball, etc. Just because, again, he cared so much in this way, and it tied into an interest of his. So my point with all of these videos and pictures, because if you email me, I will send you the video links. I don't have time to share them with you in this specific presentation, but they are great teachable tools and inspirational stories because, again, youth are surveying the landscape to just find other youth who are doing epic things. Also, when students like these that I've just showed you are caught up in something that's transcendent, that's bigger than their own life, then any of the daily dramas or weekly dramas or hate and harassment they might have to deal with at school, it just rolls off their shoulders because they know that their life is is swept up or caught up in something much bigger than that, much more impactful. What do you think about this? And I talked about, yes, you share cautionary tales and stories, but how are you doing when it comes to sharing positive stories to inspire and motivate your students? And again, I'm grateful for your participation in these polls because it helps me to know, what your situation is. And I love this because 75% of you, maybe 80% of you are saying, yes, we do this. Social norming. If you're not familiar with that term, it's just all about changing prevailing mentalities related to what youth believe is normative youth culture or adolescent culture. My colleague Randy Ross over at the National School Climate Center does a lot of work in this area, and she shared with me these posters created from a project in Wilmington, North Carolina. So the story is that many youth believe one thing, but it's just not true, actually, when you look at the numbers. Many youth might believe that we don't talk to adults here at the school. If we do, it's going to bite us in the butt. Don't do it, man. Don't do it because it's just too risky. You can't trust them. But when you actually look at the stats, a significant proportion have actually talked to adults. They speak up. They're upstanders. Some other youth might believe that the vast majority of youth, you don't get involved. You just stay on the sidelines. It's not worth it. You just can't get involved. But the cool thing is that when you look at the data, 3 out of 4, at least at this school, have stepped in because they know right is right and wrong is wrong. And they're not going to just allow victimization to take place. And here's another one. 81% of students believe they can help prevent bullying. So again, you have to collect data. And if you need help with surveys or instruments, I'm happy to send them to you. Also, if you're working on a grad degree and this is going to be your thesis or dissertation, happy to send you our research and our vetted instruments if that will assist you. But the point is that you collect the data, you share these findings, and then that gets those who are on the fringes, once they see these posters and hear the messaging, it gets those who are on the fringes, on the margins, on board with the majority. It's like you're using peer pressure in order to get those who might believe something that's just completely incorrect on board with how we're behaving and how we want to behave. Pledge campaigns are also useful. Pledge campaigns have been valuable when it comes to not drinking after prom. Pledge campaigns have also been useful related to abstinence, according to the research. And so you might think maybe we need to do a pledge campaign involving bullying and cyberbullying. It has value, but just make sure that youth who sign the pledge, they really understand the weight and the gravity of what they're committing to. They're not just doing it because every other kid has signed it. That's really key. This is me, second from the left, with my intramural ultimate Frisbee team at the university. So I get to connect with students outside of the classroom, and that's so very valuable when it comes to building climate and knowing that the students knowing that I care about them. Because in the sort of like liminal space of being out there on the sidelines and drinking water between games, etc., they open up to you, they chat with you, and I get to hear about their relationships, their hopes, their dreams, their struggles, and I get to invest in them and I get to mentor them. Simply from the sports field, I've been invited to and have attended multiple weddings of students who then grew up and got married. And it's the best thing ever. And I know that, we have families and after our school day, we're just whipped and we got to get home and spend time with our kids. But are there opportunities to connect with your students outside of the classroom walls? Because if so, it will really help them know that you deeply care about them, and that will spread across the student body. We also see poster contests. And so in various situations, you might be able to organize a contest that involves construction paper and markers. It might also involve YouTube, where you ask them to use their device to come up with a PSA, a public service announcement about cyberbullying, about dating violence. Here it says toxic text messages, about sexting. And so maybe you get, what I've done, just my recommendation to you is you get local businesses to donate prizes for, let's say, first, second, and third place. You also have different categories like spoken word poetry, t-shirt logo. And Bridget talked about the contest that you all had related to kindness, which warmed my heart. I love that. But the cool thing is that a good number of students actually do participate. They get more invested in the topic and in the goal of the school here. And they're using their creative abilities to create content, which again, you can use to put on the school Facebook page, to get out there to all the parents, to show in the video announcements, etc., to constantly bring these topics to the forefront of their minds. I'm a fan of Jimmy Kimmel's National Unfriend Day. And the story here is that you and I, and definitely our kids, accept a lot of friend and follower requests. Our kids do it because they want to get their friends and follower count up, because it's kind of like a popularity contest. It's cultural currency. We do it because maybe we want to avoid drama or strife or a beef with a neighbor or a coworker or whatever. I mean, me personally, I'm very, very clear about like the line between personal and professional, which is hard, but that's just what I've stuck to. On National Unfriend Day, we get our students to go through their friends and followers list and unfriend and unfollow youth that they frankly don't really care about. I know we care about everyone, but you know what I mean. Like, you're never going to see this person again. Why would you want to give them access to your life, which is kind of how it is, because kids live their lives out loud online. Why would you want to give them access to like everything about you, even though, again, they're not really in your network in terms of doing life? Take the time to unfriend them. Don't bow to all the pressure you might feel to never, ever unfriend anyone or unfollow anyone. And then project-based learning. I think a lot about this, and it makes me think about Benjamin Franklin, who said, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn. So it's all about experiential learning. And I'm sure many of you implement this in your classroom and on any platform that you have with youth. This is so critical. On our website, we have a document called Digital Citizenship Activities, and these are our top 10. So I know the font is miserably hard to read right now. That's no problem. You can just find it on our website. Otherwise, drop me a note. Happy to send it to you. Use these activities because we know that as we enhance digital citizenship, youth are a little bit more mindful when it comes to what they're doing online, and ideally will stay away from the negative, harassing, hurtful behaviors. During my first presentation, I also shared about Dr. Kristen Matheson's Would You Rather digital citizenship flashcards. And so if you can't find those, happy to send those your way as well. What's the story here? And I'll keep an eye on the clock, so we definitely have time for Q&A. And again, thank you for tracking with me. I know it's been a very long day, but this definitely matters. I'm just grateful for your attention and what you're doing in this sphere of influence. Okay, so kind of, sort of, for basically all of you. And I know it's tough because you have these lesson plans to get through and you have the intention to do something like this, but maybe it's not really happening. How are we reaching our students at the beginning of the school year to set the tone, to clarify expectations about behaviors and attitudes and language, etc.? This might be done ad hoc, classroom by classroom, but I think it's so much more powerful if we do it in mass, because then it feels like we're all together, we're all connected, we're a team in making this a reality, and making these 3 years of middle school or 4 years of high school as incredible as they can be, which is possible without a doubt, but again, takes a lot of meaningful intention. Do you have something like this where you set high expectations, you amp up the students that they're a part of something special at your school, and you work to bring everyone on board? Okay, so we're kind of in the middle here, but maybe you could formalize it. I think it could have a lot of potency. And then assemblies still have much value. Assemblies sometimes get poo-pooed, but the thing is that they can be very powerful because you've got this external speaker, not just this familiar face, conveying messages in a unique manner, ideally, that really resonates with youth. Ideally, it's very useful to tap into experts around your community who can assist with, policy evaluation and maybe even research if you need help collecting data, et cetera. So whether it's assemblies or leadership trainings, we've seen a lot of experts go into schools recently devoted to DEI, which I love, which I think is so essential. Restorative justice circles can also be done in this capacity. Program review, policy review, et cetera. I think it's useful. Just curious what your situation is. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And I appreciate the honesty, of course, with the bottommost response. I mentioned that it's important to be the trusted adult, and you've heard that phrase for such a long time, but what I'd commend to you is, how about being the askable adult? Because again, youth are looking around to figure out who they can talk to, who they can just sort of chat with, freestyle with, just discuss with, brainstorm with about what they're going through, about issues that they're having with peers, with school stuff, with pressures that they feel from their parents or from society and culture. Be the askable adult. And then honestly, you have to identify yourself as that person so that youth know that they can come to you. Whether you do that through some sort of creative sign or just get the word out, be the askable adult. And then parents, how are we connecting with parents? This is tricky, right? Because in this case, in this photo, I'm speaking to a parent audience where there was a tragedy in the community. And you can imagine that so many parents come to that event. But then maybe you, in your specific area, you've organized parent events and you only have like a few come, and half of them are educators and kind of have to be there because they work at the school. And you're thinking, man, if all of the parents would have shown up, or a decent majority of them would have been coming to all these parent events that we've been hosting over all these years, maybe, just maybe, we could avoid a tragedy because they would be in the know, they would be on the same page, they would be conveying the same sort of message and using the best possible resources that we're able to share with them, etc. So it's super tricky, and I totally get that. But we need a united front, and we need to keep trying to get in front of them, to get them on board, to help us with our initiatives. How are you all doing in this area? And again, I want to extend all sorts of grace towards you because I know how tricky and difficult this is. And we're almost done. Well, that's encouraging. At least 1 out of 2 of you would say good. So yeah, I mean, there's work to be done, and maybe this could also come up during the Q&A. Anonymous reporting systems. I've been to the New York City Department of Education website where they've got this anonymous form. It's kind of clunky and it's not user-friendly on mobile. In my opinion, it's just, are youth really using it? And maybe you'll tell me, yes, they are. But what I find is that oftentimes it's useful to have a localized solution. I've written a blog in the past about how you can set up Google Voice in order to, for free, set up an anonymous texting and voice line where students might leave you a voicemail, but they most likely will text in various concerns that they have. I know Anonymous Alerts is a paid service that some districts in that area are using, so you can consider that as well. But man, students want to speak up, they just don't want it to bite them in the butt. So provide them the avenue to do so in an anonymous way. And again, they will clue you in, and they will let you know about unsafe spaces on campus. They will let you know about people being targeted or populations being targeted. They will let you know about devices or anonymous apps that are gaining traction and causing all sorts of drama. But if they don't have an anonymous option to let you know, they often won't at all. And then here's my last major point. When I was in high school, I was a Lake Howell Silverhawk. And we received a lot of reminders. For example, we were supposed to soar above. We were supposed to rise up, because that's what a Silverhawk does. So this became part and parcel of my identity, even though maybe I thought I was a little bit lame when I was going through high school. And so we have to get to a point where we tie it into the mascot, like the school, whether you're the Cardinals or the Rams or the Trojans, whatever it is. So it's like, this is what Silverhawks do. This is what the Blue Golds do, whatever you are. This is just what we do around here. And that way we move from, I shouldn't do that, the wrongful behavior online or offline, because I'm going to get detention or Saturday school or suspended, to I wouldn't do that because it's not emblematic of a Silverhawk in this case. So yeah, we're better than that. We're more mature than that. We're not toddlers anymore. We're not juveniles, etc. All that has to be part of the messaging and part of these efforts that are really very similar to promoting esprit de corps and school spirit. Constant reminders. Even if you think that you're overdoing it, kids want to be a part of a winning culture. Kids do care about the mascot and how well your football team does, and just that your school succeeds in different ways, whether it's the debate team going off to a competition, or whether again it's the women's lacrosse team. They want to be part of a winning culture, but you can tie that into attitudinal and behavioral expectations as well. Let me clear this chart real quick before you answer it. And it should have been cleared before, but maybe I accidentally populated it, or maybe showed it too soon. What do you believe should be the top priority as we all move forward? This is my last poll and my last point. And these are the areas in which I work. So if you have any questions about them, I have this relationship with Tompkins County and the Sophie Fund, and they know that if they have any questions, they can reach out to me, and they have a friend in me. And so all of you who are on this call, you have a friend in me too. Resilience, climate, SEL, greater collaboration, I'll agree with that. Here's my contact information. I know that Bridget will also get that around as well. And so check out our websites if you need any more information, or those resources that I alluded to, as well as so many more that I'm very proud of, that I would say to you are not lame, but extremely practical, relevant, and actionable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hinduja. That was so much great information, and I really took a lot out of it personally. I'm hoping that if folks have questions, they'll pop them in the Q&A, or thoughts, feedback, anything you'd like to hear a little bit more about. We've got some clapping going on. I know my colleague here in my office is also clapping. I'm wondering, while we wait for some questions to come in, if you could just talk a little bit more about parent engagement and some of the successes that you may have seen in other districts. I know that is frequently something that we hear about, is just that parent engagement and the importance of it.
Sure. So you have to be creative. And what I've seen sometimes is a school will come up with a parent honor roll. And just like, of course, we recognize students who are part of an honor roll, the parents can make the honor roll if they, for example, and I know there's some qualifications I'll give you in a second, but parents can make the honor roll if they, for example, volunteer at field trips or at bake sales or other fundraising things, whether they show up for meetings related to these sorts of issues like parent events, etc., whether they're champions of the sports teams, whatever they do, you can make the parent honor roll. And then you can reach out to local businesses like Target and Walmart who have these community engagement departments. And I kid you not, they will give you Nintendo Wii's or Switches or a PlayStation 5 or something like that to be able to give out as a raffle prize, or, et cetera, et cetera. Don't be hesitant to ask local businesses. And of course, you might have to show their logo or something like that. But these parental honor rolls are a good idea. Secondly, incentivize participation in a few ways. And yes, maybe it would be wonderful if we could provide hot wings and beer for all of the parents, but maybe that's not really possible. But is there a way that you can provide something? I mentioned about competitions like PSA competitions, these, Bridget, you announced those winners. One way that we've also done it with districts is the announcements come in a evening event where you get a local celebrity to serve as the MC, so a recognizable face, and it could truly be the weather person from the news station, or just a celebrity who's grown up in the area. And who doesn't care about bullying and cyberbullying? Everyone does. And so you get them to come out. They are the ones who give out the awards. Parents are there to see their children being recognized and even get certificates of participation. And then you have the captive audience to lay on them the instruction, not in a heavy-handed manner, but you have the guest speaker, you have the keynoter, etc. And you also can help them walk away with resources, whether it's PDFs on a flash drive, whether you email all of them because you've collected their name and email address. That's one way to do it after all these students have participated in contests where you want to give them their awards.
Thank you so much. Let's see what we've got in here. So we have a question regarding, I think, generally seeing an increase in cyberbullying due to increasingly strained political climate, especially regarding racial divides. Is that something you've seen perhaps in your research or your work?
So it's a tricky one because we can't specifically isolate that the reason why we're seeing more, let's say, hate speech and targeting of minority populations is because of political issues specifically. But what we have seen is various sorts of increases, definitely. I was recently working on a piece involving Asian Americans, and we know that they have been targeted disproportionately so. And I'm talking about youth and adults, and we have the numbers to prove it, since COVID, because unfortunately COVID was mischaracterized or unfairly characterized as, an Asian flu or the China flu, et cetera. And so that deeply bothers me because I'm Asian, I know I'm Indian, but I still care about that region of the world. So, I mean, yes, we're also seeing more hostility, more hate speech, according to the research. And if you want to follow up with me after this call, I'm happy to send you those data pieces, but there's a link. I just can't say that it's because of the political situation specifically.
Sure, thank you. Another great question. What adjustments do you recommend to some of your great ideas during this kind of pandemic, socially distant time?
Yeah, so I mean, we just have to be creative because the overall goal is to make sure that students know that the school cares about them, that the school wants to hear what they have to say, that the school is going to stay calm and not freak out when you actually do talk to them. So however you can convey that is ideal, but most of it starts with relationship, with conversation, and ideally, frankly, one-to-one. So, you have a platform in your classroom, in your school with your students. You can control what you can control, and that's your relationship with those students. Ideally, the rest of your faculty and staff do their part. And then from that, some of these other initiatives will just naturally arise because you'll brainstorm together and you'll be like, hey, how can we give a shout out and recognize and notice and support this population, which kind of seems to be on the fringes or whatever.
Thank you. Another question that came into the chat, are there any new trends that we should be on the lookout for regarding teens and technology?
The one thing that comes to mind is just there's such an increase in live streaming. And we have a document on our website called 10 tips involving, or 10 tips, I don't know the name of it, but 10 tips in live streaming so that kids can stay safe. And you may be completely unaware as a parent that, your child gets online and, streams their games or just conversations in their bedroom, answering questions from the chat that comes in. And you just want to have a conversation about what is appropriate to share. Are you being a little bit discreet with regard to the location of your whereabouts, your daily schedule, because there could be someone with creepy or perverted motives who develops some affection towards you. And then based on the fact that, okay, now they know what school you go to because you're always wearing school swag, they know your bedroom, maybe you've been outside in the front yard and they get a feel for the street or the neighborhood. You just never know. And I don't mean to, stir up panic there, but we need to have conversations about live streaming.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, either in the chat or the Q&A for our wonderful guest? It sounds like we'll be following up with a lot of great resources from all of our speakers, as well as the recordings. Let's take one more question here. So way back in your presentation, you had a chart dealing with the different styles in the school culture. It says permissive was second to authoritative, if I read it right. So just maybe clarifying that a little bit.
A Sure, I can send you those slides if you
Great.
want, but
Great.
Yeah, the best climates, of course, were those that were authoritative. And then in a couple of instances, it was authoritarian, but by and large, permissive and neglectful were the worst.
Great. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap us up here. I want to thank everyone for your participation during this afternoon sessions. I think it went off really well. We got a lot of great information from our speakers and some tools and resources that we'll be following up with. So with that, thanks everyone for your time, and thank you especially Dr. Hinduja for your time and your expertise. It's so appreciated. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night and a good weekend. Bye-bye.